Hello and welcome back to Patrons Golf. We are officially in the last major week of the season as the 154th Open Championship at Royal Birkdale gets underway this week. Very exciting week. Love the Open Championship. Always have. I think outside of the Masters, this is probably my favorite week of the year. Completely different golf to what we see for most of the PGA Tour season. It's on at a much friendlier time schedule for me. So look, I'm absolutely stoked to finally be here. I think first off, we'll just dive into the Scottish Open and the ISCO real quickly. Big week. Obviously having Tom Kim, someone we spoke about in the Scottish Open preview, winning by two shots over Minwoo Lee and with Johnny Kiefer, Bobby Mack, Matt Fitzpatrick finishing just behind him. But I think, yeah, it's just a little bit of vindication. Obviously, Tom Kim, someone whose game was kind of trending in the right direction, had a great record here in Scotland and in links golf in particular. And I do think it's really interesting for someone like him, who I kind of touched on it in the preview, was someone who was kind of almost heading towards a battle for to keep his card this season, but he's managed to really turn around his season with the last month of golf. I don't know what was the catalyst or the kickstart to that, but look, he finishes third at the US Open. Has a couple of good finishes kind of outside of that, and then yeah, look, he profiled really well this week. I think a lot of people have been betting him recently, and then I want to say it was last week's finish that actually probably kind of scared people away. So he's the T46 of the John Deere, which I don't actually think he played that bad, in all honesty. But I think, yeah, like this, it's great for him. He seems like a nice guy. I think this is his fourth or maybe fifth win. He's still quite young as well. So look, happy for him. That's a big win, especially with, I guess, the hometown. Bobby Mack in contention, Matt Fitzpatrick. Rory wasn't really in contention after a shocking third round, but yeah, obviously very happy with him. Happy with him winning. Happy for him. Happy for myself. Um, but yeah, outside of that, Siwoo was pretty good. Yeah, here's a top 10 finish. Wasn't really in the thick of it, but look, as someone I kind of profiled, I said, look, price for him was too big, even though, I've walked away with nothing. I only played him in the outright. Like I'm still pretty happy with that. Like I look at that as a T9 result and I kind of thinking I was right there. I walk away with no money, but you got to tell yourself you're right sometimes. Uh, I think historically the Scottish has got a really good, I guess, correlation to open success. So a lot of the guys that you see on screen here are probably going to be the guys maybe in it or winning it on Sunday. And if you look at the names here, right, like there's, you know, Rory, Matt Fitz, uh, Chris Gotterup, Victor Wyndham, Tommy Fleetwood. Like if one of those guys win, it's not exactly, you're not exactly calling a massive shot there. So there are a few guys that I think I've kind of had like a little bit of bet. This won't be a betting show, but Michael Thorpe Bjornsson, I've had a little bit of a bet on him. Johnny Kiefer as well at some massive prices, right? Like, um, hoping that I guess success here does translate into another good week this week. And look, it'll be hard for both of those guys to have really good weeks. Probably pretty inexperienced with links golf, pretty inexperienced with major championship golf as well. But look, at the big prices, you're really not losing much. So happy to take some big shots there and hope they can kind of get like a top five or a top 10. Moving on to the ISCO, I won't touch too much on this because it was probably as advertised with the field. A pretty woeful, a pretty kind of woeful event. Look, I bet Lucas Glover last week, sorry, the week before, at a really big price and watched him dominate for th almost three rounds of golf and then destroy himself on Sunday. So there was no chance in the world I was betting him again. I know a lot of people followed that and have bet him the last 2 weeks, and I wouldn't fault people for not betting him again after that. That was some pretty horrific stuff to watch. Um, we ended up in a playoff with Taylor Pendrith and Stephen Fisk, which was, I think, ended up being like a four-hole playoff. Stephen Fisk gets his second PGA Tour win. I think Aaron Wise was a really good story, like a guy who took a break from golf to deal with some mental health issues, and has his wife on the bag. And I think, yeah, like a really good week for him. They're probably the only things that you really get out of these events, right? Like kind of stories like that, guys who are probably fighting for cards most years. Outside of that, Jackson Coyven, sneaks into the top 10. Probably wasn't really in it for most of the week, as favorite, which was, a bit, I kind of spoke about how ridiculous that felt, but look, I think that probably steadies the nerves a little bit after the miscut at the John Deere. His performances are just going to get better and better, so good for him. Yeah, we'll move on to the British Open. I'm just going to touch on just a few storylines going into it. I posted an article yesterday, just kind of going over a couple of the main pieces as we head to Royal Birkdale. The first one I had is Scotty Scheffler, who for the first time in 78 events missed a cut. The last time he missed a cut was the 2022 FedEx St. Jude Championship. And look, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think like a missed cut here um, is a massive deal. That 78 event streak is kind of propped up by, a good chunk of no cut signature events. But I think, yeah, there was a part of this week was just, yeah, it was a little bit staggering to see. There have been some really slow starts for Scotty this year. He's always kind of found his way to bounce back, whether that's, a strong second round to make the cut, and then he kind of finds his way into the top five or a top 10 just with a really strong weekend. But I do think that this miscut does kind of signal a really interesting, I guess, moment for how we view Scotty. So, like, from a betting perspective, this is going to be the biggest price you can get him to win an outright in the last 3 years. So, in some places, Rory's now favorite for this event. And I think that right there solidifies that, Scotty's, he is, he's not becoming an interesting talking point. I think he already is an interesting talking point because this is a guy who's obviously dominated world golf for the last like 2.5, 3 years. He's won 14 times over the last 2 seasons. And we're entering this week following a miscut, uh, with the potential that he walks away from this season without a major added to his trophy cabinet. Which you kind of sit down after his first event of the year, which he wins. You're kind of sitting back thinking, all right, here we go again. It's going to be another, 6, 7 win season. And we sit here with one win on the board. Mind you, right? He's got 4 outright seconds. I think it is 3 or 4 outright seconds. His top five, top 10 clips are the exact same as they has been for the last 2 years. But it's just that the winning aspect. He's just obviously just lost in a playoff to Victor Hovland at the Travelers. So it does almost feel crazy to even have this conversation because like numbers wise, you look at his season, like there is nothing here that you're like, wow, he's lost it. But I think that kind of shows just how good and dominant he has been. That I think like we're even broaching this conversation. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one this week. Like he's $9 at the moment at BetCris. I'm not sure what that number would have to be to get me involved. I did see that it was tens at Betfair. I think I'm probably already having a bit of a think about it. Um, but I'm not sure if there's a set number which I'm completely diving into on Scotty. But yeah, if he has a poor week this week, or just isn't I guess the normal major Scotty that we're expecting. Like I do wonder how much of a shift we do see for the remaining betting markets. If obviously Rory doesn't isn't really been involved in a ton of PGA Tour events, so it's probably not something we're super worried about. But look, we've got like four or five guys who are, having incredible seasons. Cam Young, Matt Fitz, even Victor starting to really turn a corner. I do wonder how the betting markets kind of react to a poor week here. Look, with all this said, uh, he probably wins. So it would be a complete waste of time, even diving into this. But that's probably the biggest one for me. Um, you know, 3 years or 4 years almost now. It is definitely 4 years. Between missed cuts is quite a run. I'm not sure who the leader. It might be Matt Fitz maybe now. I think he was like in the 30s. But yeah, I think an interesting storyline going in is how he goes because yeah, I mean you can see that he wins the American, T3 at Phoenix, T4 at Pebble Beach to start the season. You're probably thinking this is going to be just another Scotty year where he just stacks wins, and he hasn't. So we will see. Next one, I think this is probably the most important talking point. Like take Scotty out of it, but it's the playing conditions. We're we're looking at a brown and really fast golf course with a couple of warm days to start the week, and it's probably not what we're used to for an Open Championship. We're going to get some windy conditions, which we've kind of got here. Some wind finder for Southport, but we're not going to get the usual wet, miserable scenes that probably we're kind of used to. And I do wonder how that changes things for players. What kind of players that will bring in this week. Yeah, we saw there's a video that Maverick McNeely posted where he's bouncing a golf ball in the fairway, almost looked like he was bouncing a basketball. I think Michael Kim said that he hit a four iron almost 300 yards. John Rahm said he hit his six iron 280. Like, I do wonder how that changes things this week for us, kind of as like bettors and how we profile this week. I don't have the answer for it right now because uh, there's not a lot of links golf that I really bet on. I'm not a massive DP World Tour kind of better. So, outside of kind of the Scottish Open Championship, there's not actually a lot of links golf I'm super exposed to. Uh, and then look, there's obviously the fact that we're going to have like a lot of these DP World Tour guys that there's going to be three or four guys that kind of just, have these real experience. Jordan Smith had like a really good week last week. Trying to think of some other guys. Matthew Jordan is one that comes to mind. Like, and you've obviously got Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood as well. Like guys who are probably born here, grew up playing this golf. They've seen all these conditions. Like they're probably not probably they have the advantage right now over the American guys, over the other international guys because like I think we do have some rain forecast for the weekend. So that's obviously naturally going to take a little bit of sting out of the course. It's not going to be as hot. Uh, we'll see what the wind is doing on Sunday. Yeah, so the wind kind of drops down a bit on the Sunday. It's it is going to be interesting. I think Thursday, Friday is going to be interesting. And I couldn't tell you right now if we're going to see some like it feels naturally like if guys are hitting able to take like a four or six iron off the tee, to run it up, like I don't know how that doesn't translate to good scoring. Obviously the greens are going to be fast, but I think that's another element too, right? Like we've had almost every major for the last, however I can remember, where it's been difficult, where we've, where the majority of people, in my opinion, have kind of gone, we want you to let the course go. Like, do not intervene and kind of make it easier for these guys. And almost every time they do, they step in. And I hope we don't get that. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one because I think there's a lot of unknown for how people profile this week. And there's going to be some guys who really surprise that you probably didn't see coming. So yeah, looking forward to, I guess, how that is going to play out. Next one is course changes. So you can forget what you saw in 2017 here. Um, we're facing very different weather conditions, but Birkdale's also gone through a number of changes. So they had like a redesign done in 2021, and here are the list of changes. So it's a complete redesign of the par four fifth. That's a short par four. I think that's like 260 off the top of my head. I can't remember. Can probably find that out, but it's irrelevant for this point. A shortened and rebuilt seventh, which is a par three. A complete removal of the 14th, which was a par five. A new par five, which is the 14th hole, which was basically largely in place of the 15th, and a completely new hole. So it's a new par three, which will now be the 15th, and it's a completely different makeup to the previous par threes here. There was 14 bunkers removed, with the remaining bunkers rebuilt, I guess, more dramatically to kind of create some more problems. If you haven't seen the bunkers are they basically just go straight down. So there's no kind of ramp to hit out of, if that makes sense. So I think that's gonna cause some issues in terms of the really tight lies that you see there. But I think the back nine has been completely, I guess, almost completely repurposed, and it's going to create a much different look. So for for my purposes, I'm certainly looking at the 2017 results just to for curiosity, but I'm not really factoring any of that into how I bet this week. Last storyline for me is Tommy Fleetwood. Uh, you know, sorry, second last, Tommy Fleetwood. Born, just down the road from this week's venue. Like what a magical storyline this would be. And Tommy winning his first major championship here. I think he missed the cut at the PGA, but he's been playing some good golf. You see there, T4 at the Memorial, and then kind of almost a string of top tens. So the Travelers was a T14, but like he's historically, as we kind of said, like playing well in the Scottish translates to playing well in the Open. He played well at the Scottish. A- and if we are really going to get a different style of links golf than probably players are used to, right? If it's going to run ridiculously fast, uh, I do wonder if a guy like Fleetwood, who's obviously, born and raised on these courses, has seen absolutely every different type of scenario and weather conditions you can play here. I wonder how much of an advantage that is over the international players. I think it'd be a great story to see him become a major champion, especially this one. He kind of talked about he has some great memories from the 2017 event here, and yeah, look, I hate to do like he deserves to be a major champion, but he really does. He's been such a strong player for so long, and I think that the storyline would be great. The last storyline I wanted to touch on, I've called it major letdown. So obviously Rory, Wyndham, and Aaron Rai have won our three majors this year. And that means that we're looking at one of or potentially all of Scotty Scheffler, Matt Fitz, Cam Young, Ludwig, Colin, and Tommy Fleetwood without winning a major this season. I think for Cam Young and Matt Fitz, like with how well they've played this year, it does seem crazy that there's a possibility that neither of them would win a major. Uh, for Ludwig, like it's been such a weird season. To me, it kind of feels like a lost season. Like I'm not saying he won't get there. He's obviously really young. But I think like most people, we probably thought like he would have won one this year, or if not by now. So uh, I think it would be a real shame. And look, to be honest, I don't think his game's in a in a great spot where I'm actually even looking at him this week. So Colin and Tommy probably have had good stretches and probably it's probably a bit stiff to be thrown in this conversation as a letdown because I don't think either of them probably look at like a missed year. Maybe Colin would, but look, both of them had good enough stretches to warrant being in this conversation. I've openly talked about my um, love for Morikawa this year, and like what he did at the Masters, I think was incredible. So yeah, it's an interesting one. We obviously touched on the Scotty aspect too, but look, we're a, someone who's been playing really good golf, uh, who probably had high expectations this year on winning a major is not going to win one this year. And I do wonder how that affects the rest of the year. We're obviously entering like a really important bit of the PGA Tour season after this, but it's probably a tough one to look back in if you're one of these players who is, probably had one of the best years of their career and they're going to walk away with no majors. So they're the storylines for me, doing the usual course preview, player profiles, betting analysis. That'll be out as well later today. Looking forward to it. S Second best week of the year in golf. And yeah, I won't get into any bets I've had outside of the ones I've already mentioned, but yeah, look, I'm going to have some pretty big shots this week, and I think this is the event where you take your long shots, you try and hit your Brian Harmons. So, yep, I will see you back later for the course preview and betting analysis show. Thanks for watching.